Hey, Wes here. Thanks for joining me today. This is today's project. I had a perfectly good Salado pot that I made a couple of years ago, and I purposefully dropped it on the floor just so I could try and put it back together. And this is kind of like an experiment to see what it's like for archaeologists and museums who put pots back together. I thought it would be fun and interesting, educational. And it turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I expected. It was a fun project, and I thought it might be interesting for you as well. So, had a whole bunch of pieces. Now I have a jigsaw puzzle to put back together, and I thought that you might like to join me. So let's get started. Well, here is the pot, and I was a little overly aggressive in breaking it. I was kind of hoping for half as many pieces. I think there's over 40 pieces here, and I have started sorting them out. Some I can already figure out how they fit together. Some are gone. Some actually went into the garbage, and that's a good thing. I don't want a complete pot here because if you are really digging up an old pot in an excavation, chances are all the pieces are gone, or some of the pieces are gone. So I want to make this kind of realistic. Now, one thing that is not realistic, if this came out of the ground, it would be filthy. It would be just covered in dirt and mud and roots and such. And so the first step really would be to clean it up. Well, I don't have to worry about that. So now what I am going to do is to kind of sort this out a little bit, see if I can find some pieces that fit together. It will be nice because in some cases, I can see these are both rim pieces, and that it is going to fit together something like that. I'm going to look for some of these smaller pieces and see if I can combine them first, like these, and then slowly, like a jigsaw puzzle, get it all put together. Let's talk about supplies a little bit. I know I'm going to need more than this. A big issue is glue, and this is what I am using. It's called Duco cement. The bottom line with glue is that it needs to be soluble in some way. So you have water-soluble glues like Elmer's school glue. That will work. Some people would recommend that because sometimes you may want to take your pot apart, or maybe things aren't fitting and you need to reposition things. What you don't want to use is like wood glue. A lot of that is water resistant, even water repellent. So you don't want that sort of thing. So school glue will work. You want to test that out. This is not water soluble, and it is soluble with acetone, and that is commonly used as well. So it's fairly easy to clean up. If we want to take the pot apart later for investigation or for other reasons, that will work. Might need some tape to kind of hold things together. I think I'll be putting some sand in the bottom of my box. Obviously, probably some rags to clean things up, and cotton swabs and that sort of thing. I'll figure that out as I go along. I know that one thing you want to do is just kind of take your time, and I'm an impatient person, so that may not come easily. The first piece is dried. Reminds me of when I was a kid and we used to put together model cars and airplanes. Same glue. Let's get this together. Try and get the angle correct. It's a nice thing with a fresh break, hopefully, things will fit together a little bit easier. So I'm just going to hold it until it stays in place, and then I'll let it sit on the sand. This will need to dry overnight, so it's a slow process. So I think I'm just going to set it like that. And I found another couple pieces that fit together. I glued them previously, let it dry. Probably a good idea to wipe off that extra glue. But I want to make sure that I have a good connection. Now this particular glue isn't going to have a lot of filler in it. If you had a really old pot with lots of gaps, there are some glues out there that have a similar makeup that have filler in it to kind of fill in those gaps. Okay, I'm just going to let that sit there for a while too. I think that'll be okay. So I think what I want to do is get some of this glue off. Now another consideration with whatever glue you use is that it needs to dry clear, so you're not seeing glue in the final project. That seems to be okay. Now I have sand on the bottom of this box, but some other materials that you could consider using. I saw someone use beans, dried beans. I think that might be even better. It's not as dirty. Won't have particles sticking to your glue and stuff. Rice might work, or something like that. But for right now, the sand seems to be working pretty good. And this is just sand that I use as temper for making pots. So this doesn't look like it really fits together that well, but if you look at the edge piece here, you can see that it really does. Here's what I've got done so far in my first sitting, and I'm pretty much done for the day, and then I'll just come back to it tomorrow once it's dry, and maybe some of these pieces will fit together. These are all the stray pieces that have not been joined with anything. And my thought here is that many of these I'm just not going to use at all. If you really were to dig up a pot in an archaeological site, good chance that there'll be several parts that are gone, and so I want that to be part of it. But I will keep the rim pieces, I'm pretty sure. But I'm going to work with the other parts that I've already put together and just see how that works. With the rims, I found that I can put these two pieces together, and then this fits like that. So then the two sides might join together. So that's what I'll do first, put these together and then see what happens. The top is coming together, and I have another piece here. If I'm careful, I can get it to fit in. And like that. I am missing a little piece over here, but I think that should be my next move. Find when you just put two pieces together, it's pretty easy. But when then you join those pieces into another one, all of a sudden, any little change in it, if you're off just by a little bit, even less than a millimeter, it all kind of shows up. You can really see though how that first application of glue kind of fills in the pores. The other thing you need to be careful of is getting sand on any of your joints. So I could see why beans, for example, would be a better option than sand. So actually, I think that seems to be pretty good. So this is what I have so far. And I would like to put this piece in, but it's not here. But I do have this one. So that fits pretty good. And then I have this one. However, before I put this in, I think it makes sense to put this in over here if I can find it. So I will look for that. But in the meantime, I think this is a safe one to put in. You may ask the question, why would somebody even want something like this in their house or on a shelf? I think a couple reasons. One, this whole activity has given me some appreciation, a little appreciation, of what archaeologists have to go through. It is no small task to put something like this back together. The other thing that I think a lot of replica pottery now is really beautiful, but it looks new because it is new. So in that sense, it doesn't look particularly authentic. So this changes that, I think, considerably. I would not, wouldn't bother me to have this sitting on my shelf. In fact, it probably will eventually, although it still has work to be done. Another thing that I think would be really cool is to take a pot, break it up, and put it in a box with a bunch of dirt and give it to a kid who's interested in archaeology and help them put it together. It'd be a great hands-on activity. It could be a lot of fun. And if you don't have a pot like this, you could go out to your garage. You probably have a terracotta flower pot or one down at the garden store that you could use that way as well. The other thing is I think it solves an ethical and legal issue. Collecting old pots has issues with it, and many times we have pot hunters who are going out onto public land and destroying Native American sites, even on private land where it may be legal, but once a site is dug up, it really ruins it for future excavation. So maybe you'd like to have an old-looking pot, and this may solve part of that problem of reducing the demand for old pots. I think it's pretty fun. Okay, now I have found this one. It's kind of a tight fit, but it does go in. That's actually kind of nice. And so then this would go in next to it. I want to feel to make sure things are flush. All right, here is my situation. I've got this piece. It fits right here, but it won't go in. And some things are out of alignment a little bit, and I don't think that's uncommon. So I think what I need to do is move this place. And maybe I can just kind of wiggle it some. Otherwise, I might have to take it off entirely. But the way you do that is you take a cotton swab and some acetone, lay it on the joint, two pieces, two joints, and then cover it up with tin foil. And the fumes from the acetone ought to work its way into the joint. And it's going to take a half hour or so for that to happen. So again, maybe I'll have to take off the whole piece. Maybe I can just wiggle it around and get things to fit. I don't know yet. This is, again, all new to me. But this is the reason why you use a glue that is soluble, in this case with acetone. Because invariably you're going to want to move some things around, or maybe you need to take it all apart in the end. This took much longer than I expected. It's been at least an hour and a half. But finally, whoop, it's come loose. So I think what I need to do is glue this piece to this piece, and then I think it'll all just fit in one. So I'll do that and then come back. Okay, here we are. This turned out to be, I think, a good thing. It's a tight fit. But if you kind of wiggle it in there, everything seems to be pretty smooth. So I think I'll glue that up, and it's starting to look pretty good. This is what I've got so far. And I have something to admit. This piece here fits here, and it just doesn't really want to go. So I scraped off the edges. I would imagine that would make a archaeologist cringe. Still a very tight fit, but it does go in. So the idea of scraping off, removing material seems to me to be what you don't want to do. But sometimes the way these pieces fit together, the other option is to start taking things apart and redo it. I have wondered how strong this Duco cement is. It's been pretty good to work with. The key is to first put a little bit on the edge, let that set up, and then re-glue it. So this is an old shirt that I have. This is fired pottery, and I glued this joint. So let's just see how much pressure. I'm curious if it breaks on the joint or if it breaks out in the pottery. So the joint is really, really tough. And you can feel that it's stable. It does not wiggle around at all. So this stuff works really quite well. This is the last big piece I have. The other pieces I have don't seem to fit very well. So let's get this thing glued in. Put on a fairly liberal amount of glue on these edges. Try to fill up any gaps because things do not fit perfectly. So that fit in okay. So this is where I'm at. I quite honestly kind of like the look of it. All of this, I have to figure out what I'm going to do with that. I do have some small pieces. They don't seem to fit anywhere exactly. So I'll take a look at this later on. The next step, I think, is to clean it up. And so I've got acetone here in a little pad, and it's nothing to it. I'll probably take a couple of different tries to clean it up, but just all along the seams, the cracks, and there's sometimes little bits of glue that are still there. The pot is cleaned up as best I can, and as I mentioned before, I've got a number of pieces like this that fit somewhere in this big hole. So I have a couple of choices right now. One is just to leave this as it is. I think it would look kind of cool on a shelf, just like this. But the other option is to try and figure out a way of where these things belong. And what you do is you fill in with plaster of Paris. That will be for another video. Another option would be to actually paint that plaster of Paris, either a little or a lot. So I'll tackle that at another time. So hopefully you found this kind of interesting, kind of enjoyable. And if you like it, thumbs up are good. If you're not subscribed, please do that. And always, I love those comments. Thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, this is Wes wishing you health, happiness, peace, and love. Take care. Bye-bye.